Hi there. My name is Alina. I am the lead UX designer for the team in charge with creating the experiences for the FIFA game. And today I'm here to talk about where do we place UX in game development. But before that, I just want to say some things about me. This kind of shows my connection with football prior to joining EA. And in some few words, this is who I am. I professionally started being a UX designer, I think it was 5 years ago when I started working for what some of you might know, the ING's internet banking system, Homebank. I was the person behind the new experience for Homebank. But I think I did UX job even before having an official entitlement as a UX designer. Personally, I like to dance a lot. I can dance anytime, anywhere, anyhow, even without music. And something else, I think I have, at least I consider I have a good sense of humor, because I succeed in being the only person that laughs at my jokes. So that makes me a happy person, I guess. Before going into what is UX, I actually want to know to whom am I talking. So I would like to know who here considers himself a designer of experiences. Raise hands. Okay, who is a game designer? Okay, who is an interface designer? Okay, who is coding? Okay, who considers himself a jack of all trades? Okay, cool. What do you know about UX? Is it the menus? Who thinks it's about menus? No one. Cool. I'm happy for that. So what UX is, I'm going to start with a general introduction about UX. What UX is for me, and mainly for the people who consider themselves UX designers, is about mainly solving problems. You're trying to understand what are the problems, or what would your users need to have in order to feel better. So we're trying to design better experiences. For that to happen, you kind of need some things, and these are what I like to call them the pillars, the cornerstones of what you need in order to design good experiences. So first of all is you have to be curious. You have to look at the world differently. You have to have these lenses of trying to understand or trying to pick up things that don't work, and then have the curiosity of understanding what is wrong and why they don't work. So you really have to look, to want to look and to observe the people you are designing for, and actually want to know more about that. But it's not enough to be curious. You also have to ask questions. Whenever I talk to people, to students, to people who are interested in doing UX, they have this fear of going out there to talk to people. Everybody's scared of interacting with someone. They might bite you. People don't bite. Humans don't bite. Maybe they used to in the past, but not anymore. So you really have to go out there and ask questions. And it's a tricky one, because asking questions is not that easy as some of you might think. It's quite hard to ask the good questions, and to ask questions that give you insightful responses. Usually, when we go out there, we have our own assumptions. And what we do when we're trying to find out how things work, we're subconsciously trying to validate those assumptions. It's good that you don't, and try as much as possible to not try to push or sell your ideas, but just Ask people how they feel, what they feel. Try to talk about emotions. Let them talk. Don't go out there with a list, a script of questions and just go through them. Try to really connect with the people you're talking to because you really want to make their lives better and their experiences better. Then besides, so if you're curious and if you've nailed the questions that you really want to ask, you still need something else. And this is a hard one. You need to have empathy. And whenever we're talking about empathy with people, everybody thinks that you have to feel what the other person feels. I would say it's not that, because luckily we cannot feel what other people feel, but we can try to at least try to understand what they are feeling without having our own biases. Most of the times we think we understand what they feel. The true reality is we have a lot of projections. So I would tell you to leave your biases when you're talking to someone at home and not judge your users, not judge them about not understanding things, about not being smart enough, not knowing a certain language, not knowing to read, and so on and so forth. You just need to want to solve the problems as you would solve them for your friends, for your closest friends, for your family. So you really need to look at the people you're designing and understand what they are going through. Some of you might not believe this, but there's some connection between UX and dating. Do you believe me? Who believes me? No one. Okay. Who has been recently on a first date? I'm not gonna judge. No one? In the last 1 year, no one's dated for the first time? I'm not gonna put the lights on you, so just, okay. Thank you. What happens when you're trying to date someone for a first time? What do? You try to research a lot, not research, try to find some things about that person because you really want to create a nice experience when you're first dating someone. You know, the first impression really matters. So you want to have that first impression as good as possible. What we do nowadays, the research for that is called stalking. Some of us know how it is, but actually, that's really useful because only by knowing the person you're dating with that good, you will be able to create a good experience if you think it's worth, of course, because we're talking about personal connection, so you might not just put yourself into a role that doesn't fit you. You will, of course, try to see if that person fits you and try to create that good experience. So there is a connection, a very strong connection between dating and UX because you're designing an experience for that person. Now, who considers himself a designer of experiences after this one? Okay, I still haven't convinced you. So now let's have a look at what is the UX process. What do we do when we want to create good experiences? Well, we first start with the strategy. In this step, we're trying to define the goals that we have. We're trying to understand what is the problem that we're solving, or at least have a slight understanding of what is that we're solving. Then, this is where we define also the vision and we do some initial brainstorms. Then the next step is to actually find more about the problem. We're going to talk with a lot of people. We're going to look into a lot of YouTube videos, into reviews. We're going to probably look into analytics if it's already an existing product, only for being able to understand more about what's happening, how people feel, what they feel, when they feel, what is the context when they feel something. Then after discovery, after doing a lot of research, because you have tons and tons of information, you just need to narrow it down to some conclusions. You need to draw some conclusions, you get to some insights. This is when you create personas. You cannot actually design for everybody. You need to have some stereotypes of the people you're designing for. Then you really need to understand what's their journey. So we're building journey maps, but we're building contextual journey maps because the journey maps are different for a first-time use than for a second-time use, and then maybe for I don't know how many uses. We're trying to also build workflow diagrams to see actually what are the steps our users are go through. Also, when we're designing journey maps, we're looking at what are the lows of that experience. And from the lows, we can see a lot of opportunities. We identify the opportunities and we build opportunities map. With this in mind, we move to the next step, which is the actual design phase. This is when we do, again, a lot of brainstorming. From the opportunities, we move to the brainstorming sessions. We try to find solutions that are going to, in our mind, are going to help our users have a better experience. Then from the concept, we're moving to a journey to be, the journey that we want our users to have. Then further to some sketches, paper sketches, pen and paper sketches, which are really, really easy to do and rapid to test. Then we do wireframes and some layouts, and we move to the next step, which is the testing phase. Here, we're trying to actually get back to our users with a prototype, with something that might look as close as it can be to the final functionality in order to get some feedback on what we're designing. Ideally, you should do this early in the process, early in the development cycle, because you don't want to waste important resources on developing something that's not validated with the users. You look, of course, at the testing reports and then draw some conclusions, and you can start reiterating. If not, you move to the development phase when you're supporting the team with actually checking if things are done as they should be done, as meant in the design. Then you also start thinking of what are the analytics that you need in order to be able to audit the success of the feature and the design that you build. And this is not where UX ends. A lot of people say this is where UX ends, but if you remember, you start from trying to understand where is the problem. So after launching a product, you get to have real data. Now is the moment that your users are using your product and you have real analytics that can show you where things can go wrong, and that's where you start again building improvements and building new things. Looking at the bigger picture, this is how the process looks like. From the testing phase, you can go back to if the test's results are not good. You can move back to rediscovering or trying to understand, gathering more people around the table to understand maybe this time better the problem and design better solutions, or you could just fine-tune the designs and then move further to the development cycle. Now, when it comes to gaming, I've been in with EA for 1 year and 9 months already. And I'm coming from a totally different industry, so I've seen some things. There's goods and bads, of course. I'm gonna start with some bad, because then you want to end with the good part. What do you consider bad UX? For me, bad UX is when people go like this. And this is just the beginning, because it usually ends with destroying some controllers. I've seen that in our studio, with some screens, with maybe a computer, a console that you have, whatever. You don't want this to happen, or you might want this to happen if you want to sell them then a new TV screen or a new console. But ideally, you want your users to have a really good time. In order to prevent this from happening, of course, there's disconnections. So besides those moments when the internet is sucky and you cannot do actually anything as a game developer to prevent that from happening, this is where research helps you, because if a user is constantly struggling with understanding why is he blocked in a certain point and how he can advance, what are the things he can do in order to advance, if you launched your game and you didn't understand that you have a problem in that, it's probably because, well, either you didn't have enough resources to fix that, or maybe you didn't do your research well. I'm going to give you an example of how people expect UX to work, and that's a bad example for me. I was, some time ago, I think I was asked to have a UX input on a small feature. We were supposed to show something on a screen, a message on a screen while in gameplay, while playing the game, to tell you that there's something happening and you should know that in order to action on it. So I was approached, asked about how many seconds should that stay on the screen. That information should stay on the screen. And my initial response was, I don't know, let's call someone else, ask them how long does it take them to ask that, to read that information, and then ask some more people, and then draw a conclusion. People usually expect UX to have these recipes, these things that work and that are generally available and generally applied. The good thing is there is no average human, so there is no average response for that. It's just going out there and testing with a variety of people, seeing, actually understanding how something works for different people, different than you, different than your colleague, different than your mother, than your father, than your friend, than your cat. So you want to have people who haven't interacted so far with this functionality and want to see how they react to that and then draw some conclusions. Of course, there are some UI patterns that we have to follow. A button has to have some shapes, some, you call them, and I cannot remember that name right now. There are patterns that we, of course, follow, but those are mainly UI patterns, and those are from science that show us how people react to some screens, to some elements. So those, of course, we do apply. But when it comes to people being different and reacting different to some things, it's all a matter of testing. And you're going to say, of course, because I heard this many times, if Henry Ford asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. But that's not what you ask. You don't go out there and ask people, what do you want? You put them to perform a task. You look at how they perform. You try to understand what they are feeling, what they are doing, what's their problems. That's your problem and your job as a designer to understand what they are struggling and what is the solution. Because only if you understand the problem, you're going to be able to design a good solution. And most of the times we think the solution is here. People don't know how to press the button because, I don't know, they don't see it's a button. Maybe they don't see it's a button because maybe the call to action on the button is not something that should stay on a button. Moving on, what is a good UX? I asked people days back, and some of them are here in the room, what is good UX for them? It's mainly the thing that you cannot see. When there's a good experience, you know it's a good experience, but you don't necessarily know why it's a good experience. So it's someone that I actually liked that. Someone told me that if he was to compare it with the dining experience, because dining is something we like to have, food is really rewarding when it's a good food. UX is, he said, for him, UX is like salt. When you have just enough salt, the quantity of salt that you should have, the food is delicious. But when salt is missing, you know it's missing, and you might not have such a good dining experience. I want to give you an example of what good UX means for me. And it's not something that wow, but for me, it's something that can be easily transformed into a good experience if you just want those guys to have a good time. I hope it's gonna play. There. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Hello? Go ahead and adjust your settings so you can hear me, all right? Adjust the settings until you can hear my voice. Could you try and pick up the pace a little bit? This is getting embarrassing. Ma'am, are you there? Can you hear me? Hello? Go ahead and adjust your settings so you can hear me, all right? Adjust the settings until you can hear my voice. Could you try and pick up the pace a little bit? This is getting embarrassing. Ma'am, are you there? Can you hear me? Hello? Go ahead and... All right, are we good now? Oh.
Okay. That was really good. What did you think it was good in this experience? I thought it was a really nice touch, the third response. Besides interacting, it's surprising. Of course, you would expect this kind of experience for them to interact. Well, it's nice to have, it's really nice to have, so I'm not downsizing that. But the final touch, it's just you're having such a comforting voice. That's the moment when you're saying, wow, this is such a nice experience, such a good experience. And those wow moments are the ones that are going to make your users praise your game and maybe want to discover more of this kind of nice touches. Then, before ending this talk, I'm gonna say some things that I was able to see throughout my journey so far with the gaming industry. There are some challenges and there are some things that can be improved. One that I see a lot of times is not having a real understanding of when UX should be plugged into the development process. Usually they come asking for UX input, and I'm not talking about EA. I've been talking to several other colleagues of mine who've been in gaming industry. It usually happens that you get to UX once you already have the strategy, once you have defined already what you want to build. Of course, it might be good to involve UX at the beginning and throughout the entire cycle, because we have a lot of time to dedicate our resources and everything to keep in touch and keep in close connection to the users. So we might know and have some insights that might help you when defining the strategy and when defining what we might to build in order to create better experiences. Then, of course, there's this scare of and panic around testing and about showing our games to the users. We don't want to show that because it's going to be this really cool, awesome feature that's going to be shown to the user, and then there's no surprise. Everybody's going to talk about that prior to the launch. Well, there are NDAs, and there are, of course, ways you can get feedback on some features even without showing the entire functionality. You really have to do that, and you have to do that early. How it happens now, well, you do some strategy, you do some discovery, you do a lot of these cool things that should define your feature and put them right at the beginning of the cycle, and then you do development, and you do development. And then you eventually do some testing. But this is kind of late in the development cycle because you've already invested a lot of resources and a lot of time in building something that can get to be tested with the user. That's an inbuilt prototype. That's already halfway developed game. That's not a prototype as in other industries are defined as being prototypes. And then after you do the testing, you might see there's some bad things, but not have the option to restart the cycle and improve the functionality, and you might take the decision that it's good as good as it gets, and you launch the product as such, and you end up with doing some more extra development, and then that's it, you ship the game. That's because why cannot we a really fast prototype? Because we have controllers. Most of the games that are on console are, of course, controlled by controllers. Wow, that's something genius that I just said. So you really need to be able to interact with the prototypes that you're building with a controller. Compared to other industries, mobile games and other kind of applications where you can have a desktop or you can have a mobile and you can literally build a prototype in 10 minutes. For the gaming industry, it's quite difficult because you don't have so many tools, programs that can allow you to map a controller to a screen and then be able to navigate through it with the controller. So that's something painful for the game industry. We're trying to find alternatives and solutions for this. Of course, there's more work into that, but it's really imperative to start testing early in the process, because otherwise you might develop something uninformed, not knowing if your users are really happy with that. Then, co-creation. Of course, we're designers. Of course, the game designers are these really cool, great minds that know what's going to be the experience, what's going to be the fun, what's going to be the excitement around the game. And they are kind of like the orchestra director. They know how they want the user to feel. They might not believe they can get some insights and can get some really cool features when co-creating, but trust me, this is an experiment that could turn into a way of working if you just open yourself to inviting some users, some real gamers who love your product and who, trust me, will be so willing to help you in designing those features that will make them love your product even more. And then collaboration. Of course, we already do that, but I think that we cannot have enough of that. We might like to believe of ourselves like the jack of all trades or Superman. I like to say that's a really heavy thing to carry on your shoulders. Sometimes it's just good to say, you know what, I'm going to start a collaborative workshop for 2 days, or you just need some days to take off from your regular day-to-day work. Invite some people that have different backgrounds, to have a multidisciplinary team, and just start ideating, then creating concepts, then doing some sketches, and then eventually you will get to some really, really cool prototypes that can be really fast tested with the users. And if there's something I want to end with, because I've heard it so often, not only in the gaming industry, in every kind of industry, is you are not the user. I'm not the user. I'm not designing for me. I'm not designing for the game designer. I'm not designing for my manager. I'm just designing for the people who are gonna use this product. Of course, we're playing. Of course, we love our game. And we know the insides out. We know all the iterations. We know everything about the game. If you're going to show it to your colleagues, if you're going to show it to your mother, eventually she might not be familiar with that. But then again, she is your mother. She might not want to hurt you with the feedback she's giving. So I'm begging you. You start from seeing a problem that you faced, but then move to talking with others about the problems that you identified. Because luckily we are so different, and you really want to get in touch with those guys that are going to eventually love your product. So that was my presentation.